Hello everyone, this is Thomas. I'm the Karate Armchair Historian. First of all, I wanted to thank everybody for watching and commenting on my prior videos. I have revisited my YouTube channel recently and realized that there is lots of viewers, subscribers and commenters. So I would like to thank once again everybody, and I promise to produce at least one interesting, well, hopefully interesting video per week, and maybe two. Okay, on to today's topic. Today we're going to talk about this book, Karate Do Kyohan, Shotokan's master text, as well as we're going to talk about related books that came prior to that one. Not to be confused with this one, Karate Do Kyohan. As you can see, both books have very similar graphic design, similar type of font, similar photograph. But Karate Do Kyohan is a completely different animal, and we're going to talk about that book at a future date when I'm going to discuss the split between Shotokai and the JKA after the passing of Gichin Funakoshi. That book, the Karate Do Kyohan, plays a very important part in that split, as well as this book, which we're also going to discuss when we talk about the Shotokai JKA split. And today too we're going to quote from Karate Do, My Way of Life, as well as from some other books by Gichin Funakoshi, in which he describes how he came about to write the master text. Now, what is, I guess, most important to know is that there are actually three, or even 3.5 master texts of Shotokan. The first one was Totei Ryukyu Kenpo, written by Funakoshi in 1922. The second one was Rentai Goshin Karate Jutsu, 1925. Third one was the Karate Do Kyohan, the master text, written in 1935. And the reason that I said there is 3.5 books is because in 1970, well, actually, I'm sorry, in 1958, after the death of Funakoshi, a second edition of Karate Do Kyohan came out, to be followed in 1973 by a new English translation. I'm going to discuss every single one of these books and also various editions and English language translation. It's very important to know the differences between them, I think, because there really seems to be lots of confusion about these texts. For instance, there are some reprints or English language translation reprints of some of the early books available on the internet, especially on Amazon. But unfortunately, there is a lot of confusion as to which translations and which editions actually correspond to the original Japanese books. So we're going to discuss every single one of these. Now this video is going to be the first part of our discussion of the Kyohan. We're going to talk about its history. The second part, which will hopefully be done in a couple of weeks, I will be discussing the mysteries of the Kyohan and also the various controversies that have kind of occurred over the years because of the various editions and various translations. The first master text was Totei Ryukyu Kenpo, and that was written in 1922. There are two different accounts by Funakoshi himself of how this book came about, and this is what he says about it in My Way of Life. It was not long after I arrived in Tokyo that Hoan Kosugi, the painter, urged me to write a reference book on Karate Do. This I knew would be no easy task, for as I have noted before, there was no written materials available in Tokyo and virtually none even in Okinawa. So I began by writing to masters Asato and Itosu, as well as other friends and colleagues in Okinawa, asking them to send me whatever information ideas they could on the art of Karate Do. But of course, when it came to writing the book, I had to rely almost entirely on my own personal experience during the days I was training and practicing the art in Okinawa. Published by Bukosha in 1922, the book was entitled Ryukyu Kenpo Karate, and to introduce it, I had the honor of introducing brief forewords by a number of eminent people. So that's what he says about this first book in My Way of Life. Now, there is another book that purports to be a book by Funakoshi, The Essence of Karate, and we'll discuss at a later date all of these additional books that allegedly are written by Funakoshi. But in this book, we have a following paragraph about the creation of the first book. The week-long karate course at the Poplar Club, which was the artist club that was headed by painter Kosugi, was very enjoyable, and on the evening of the final day, a dinner banquet was held in my honor. It was at that banquet that the distinguished artist said, by that he meant Hon Kosugi, since I would be returning to my hometown, there would be no one for him to go should he have a question to ask concerning karate. As such, he said that he would like for me to prepare something in writing about the subject. Even though I had drunk quite a bit, upon returning that night to the prefectural student dormitory where I was staying, I promptly began working on the framework for what I would write. By the following morning, I had prepared the outline for the entire book and, over the next several days, finished writing all of the text. After completing the manuscript, I wasted no time in paying Mr. Kosugi a visit to show him my work. When I saw him, he commented on the great speed with which I had responded to his request, revealing to me just how surprised and impressed he was with my effort. But, the artist informed me, when he asked me to write about karate, he had meant an article to appear in a magazine. I, however, jumped to my own conclusions and written an entire book. So there are already two things here, two problems that are difficult to reconcile. Well, first of all, the question is, of course, did Kosugi actually ask Funakoshi to write a book, or did he ask him to write an article? But second, more important one is that Funakoshi clearly indicates in this book that he wrote to both masters, Azato and Itosu, to get some ideas from them on what should be included in the book. We can assume that this happened in about 1922, or perhaps in 1921, but I don't think so. I think 1922. Now, this of course makes it very difficult to reconcile with the deaths of Azato and Itosu. Azato died in 1905 and Itosu in 1915. Therefore, neither one of them were alive at the time that the book was written. So, not sure if or what Funakoshi actually meant by saying that he wrote his two masters and asked for their ideas or input about the book. The Great Kanto earthquake hit Japan in 1923, and with it, the plates of Funakoshi's first book were destroyed, and it appears that many of the copies of the book were destroyed as well. This prompted him to write a second book, 1925's Rentan Goshin Karate Jutsu, and this book expanded upon the first one a bit. And the biggest difference between the two, to me at least, is that the first one contains mostly drawings, whereas the second one contains over 200 photographs. The drawings in the first book, Ryukyu Kenpo, actually pretty cool. As you can see on the PDF, they show a silhouette of a person that looks kind of like Funakoshi himself. And the person that drew all these pictures was named Yamashiro Matsasuna, and he was one of Hon Kosugi's students. So obviously he put a lot of time and effort into drawing these silhouettes. The second book, Rentan Goshin Karate Jutsu, by way, which translates to strengthening spirit through techniques of karate. Well, that book contains over 200 photographs of Funakoshi himself. And that is the best way to differentiate between the two books. The first one, 1922, contains mostly drawings. The second one, 1925, contains mostly photographs. Then in 1935, Funakoshi decided that finally time came to write a definitive master text. And he wrote the Karate Do Kyohan. And in 1958, after his death, Shotokan, which inherited the rights to all of his books, or most of his books at least, published a second edition of the Kyohan. And I think that this particular book is the one that's most controversial because it contains a lot of stuff that was inserted by Shotokan that probably would not have been written by Funakoshi himself. But once again, we're going to talk about that at a later date. Well, I don't think that there are any English translations or English editions of reprints of the very first book. I have this book called Tote Jutsu. It's by Gichin Funakoshi. It's a beautifully printed cover. This book claims, when I purchased it, that this is the first Funakoshi book. Now that is not true. If you look inside, it contains photographs with a telltale crumpled background that tells us that this book is in fact an English version reprint of the second book, not the first one. I don't believe that there exists a English reprint or an English version of the first one. There is another book. You can see the title of it up here. And this book is the only one out of these reprints that I do not have. When it first came out on Amazon, I was going to buy it. Then, of course, I thought about it. By the time I decided to do so, it was already gone. And now, it sells for, at the very least, $150. Now, I do not think that's a reprint of the first edition. I believe that it's also, of the first book. I believe that it's also a English reprint of the second book, just like this one. If anybody knows, if anybody has that book, please let me know. And if it is indeed English reprint of the first book, then it's definitely worth buying, even at the inflated price. Now, as I have mentioned before, the Shotokan came into the possession of all the rights to Funakoshi's writings, and in 1958 they published a second edition of Karate Do Kyohan, and in English this is the English edition of it, which was published in 1973, translated by Mr. Oshima, and this book is famous because it contains pictures of Oshima performing various kata and techniques, etc. Now, because it is Shotokan that holds the rights to these writings, there's a little bit of a controversy as to whether or not whatever Oshima shows in the book is something that Funakoshi himself would have shown. Oshima was very closely, or still is, because he's still alive, he was very closely acquainted with Igami and Hironishi of the Shotokan. All three of them attended Waseda University in Japan. And even though Oshima wasn't really Shotokan, the techniques that he shows in this edition of the Kyohan seem to be kind of in between the current Shotokan techniques, the exaggerated long stances, and what's currently done by JKA and JKA related schools. After some of the rights to the Funakoshi earliest writings came into public domain, there was a slew of various English translations of the Kyohan, such as this one, which is a reprint of the first edition. And this one is translated by Harumi Suzuki Johnson. And as opposed to the Shotokan version, the second edition, this one contains pictures of Funakoshi himself performing various kata and techniques. Because this is a true reprint of Japanese text, you can see the difference between the two is that this one only shows some of the movements, whereas the second edition of the Kyohan shows virtually every movement of each of the 15 principal JKA katas. Anyway, to summarize, the most important things to know is that there were 3 editions of the master text. We got the 1922 Totei Ryukyu Kenpo. We got the 1925 Rentan Goshin Karate Jutsu. And then we got the 1935 Karate Do Kyohan. And then, of course, in 1973, we have the Shotokan second edition of Karate Do Kyohan. As for the most common English reprints, this is the reprint of the 1935 Kyohan. And this, please do not be misled, is the English version of the reprint of the second book of, not the first one, but the second one, Goshin Rentan. Next episode, when I revisit the Kyohan, we will talk about the content. There is lots of controversy, lots of interesting things. Meanwhile, please wait. I'm going to show some PDFs of the first 2 Japanese books. I'm going to comment on them. And if you don't have those PDFs, they are available. They're in public domain. I will include the links in the description below. And feel free to download them. I believe that they are both in public domain and that copying them does not violate any laws. Now, even though I'm a lawyer, just don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure that they are in public domain, so feel free to download them. So this is the PDF of the Totei Ryukyu Kenpo 1922. This is the book that was the first one to be written by Funakoshi, and the plates of which were destroyed at the Kanto earthquake. And these are the first few pages of it. We have the picture of young Funakoshi himself, and there is the famous picture of his muscular back. And this, of course, right here is the group photo taken on the occasion of the Crown Prince's visit to Okinawa, in which Funakoshi and a number of his students participated, and which played such an important part in the history of karate. These 2 people right here, I believe, are the principals of the school in which Funakoshi taught. There's the text. And then we start with the technical part. We have and these are the famous drawings I was referring to before. Now we have the formation of the fist, the various kinds of fists, stances, and here we have an example of the I mistakenly referred to this as a silhouette. Obviously, it's an outline, but it's pretty cool the way it does kind of look like Gichin Funakoshi himself. Now, there is a large number of these pictures. I think that just shows how much work was put into this book. Now, the only photographs that are in this book are the ones that are right here, and that's photographs of various throws. And then we go to kata, and this of course is what we now know as Heian Nidan, and when this book was written it was still known as Pinan Shodan. But I'm amazed at the number of these illustrations here and how well drawn they are. And I was surprised to see these be so good, and to read how kind of disparagingly Funakoshi refers to them in his biography. Well, not really the drawings themselves, but to the book itself. He says he's kind of ashamed of it, but I think a lot of work was put into this book. So there's kata. What is this? This is teki. At that time it was known as Naihanchi, later on to be called Kibadachi by Funakoshi, and then finally the name was changed to teki. We will go into those details at a later date with a later video. And so on and so on. There is still teki, and this is kanku, kanku dai. And there's a bunch of kata, and you can check this out yourself by using the link that I'm providing below the video. I think here he just goes, at the end of the book, he goes briefly into some of the other kata, but he doesn't really go into details. There are just some drawings and some descriptions of other kata. And that's the back cover of the book. And this is the 1926 book, the second one. And as you can see, this one is a little bit more intricate than the first one. It has collared dust jacket. This is the back of the dust jacket, and this is the actual cover of the book itself. And we also have the very same group photo that we saw in the first book, but here the pictures of the school principals are not really visible. This photograph of Funakoshi and his muscular back once again. Him and his students. This is the student at the time the book was written, obviously not the same as the photograph taken during the visit of the Crown Prince. And then we have the text, and after that we have photographs. And as you can see, unlike in the first book here, it's all photos and not drawings. So the formation of the fist are photos. I believe these are Funakoshi's fists. Stances. Makiwara. And these are the famous Makiwara photos that you can see. You can see in many different places. And here we have throws again, this time. And we have, once again, Pinan Shodan or Heian Nidan. But this time you can see the characteristic crumpled background, which is how I differentiate this book between this book and the first one. Now you go into various kata. This appears to be current Heian Nidan, or back then it was, yeah, this is still Heian Nidan. Here's Teki again, or Naihanchi as it was called at that time. And some other kata here. What is this? Well, this is this is Kanku. Yeah, this book is actually pretty cool. I do like the drawings of the first one a lot, though. I think they're very well done. Although the photographs are actually neat too, just to see Funakoshi himself performing this kata. And this is, at the end, there's various things that he writes about, and among them are the infamous untranslatable passages, supposedly taken from the Bubishi. We will discuss that at a later date. I think that is one of the most interesting mysteries of the Kyohan itself. These right here. Passages that were left untranslated in both English versions. And this is pretty cool. This is the back pages of the book. Back cover. So thank you for watching.